Cults often see themselves as religions, but instead of having their values and beliefs firmly fixed within a higher power, they have a person as their leader. They also have disturbing views on life and follow their own set of rules. Historically, becoming part of a cult has more often than not had dire or even deadly consequences. From a group that believed the Hale-Bopp comet in 1997 contained aliens to one who firmly instilled pedophilia as a divine right, cults are often incredibly powerful and are capable of keeping their members' minds captive. Cults can be found all over the world. They are often referred to as movements or sects, and in the US alone, it is estimated that there are between 3,000 and 5,000 such active groups. Between 1955 and 1977, there have been 5 particular cults or movements that were so incredibly powerful they crashed, unable to contain the attraction they created. They all saw themselves as religions and believed they held the ultimate power. All of these groups promised followers a utopian future, and since people are often gullible enough to believe that a person can give them an idealistic life without pain and suffering, hundreds fell for them. So let's take a look at these 5 most powerful former religions as they believe they were. The People's Temple was founded by a man named Jim Jones in Indiana in 1955. At first, it appeared to be a progressive organization that would advocate for things like civil rights, decent operating homes for the elderly, and those with mental health issues. Who wouldn't want to support an organization like that, right? However, Jones soon became so disillusioned and high on power that he moved himself, his family, and his following to Redwood Valley in California. He chose this spot specifically because he had read it would be a good place to survive a nuclear war, something he thought was in the near future. By 1974, the group had grown to consist of no less than 900 members, and the People's Temple moved to Guyana in South America. There, they set up an agricultural commune, and from the inside, it truly looked like a hassle and problem-free life. However, this idealistic lifestyle just wasn't sustainable, and a few disillusioned members tipped off the American media of the armed compound known as Jonestown. They told them about the rehearsal of mass suicides they had been forced to take part in. Everything came crumbling down in November of 1978, when Congressman Leo Ryan traveled to Jonestown where he, 3 journalists, and 1 defector were shot and killed before Jones ordered his followers to drink a cyanide-laced drink, resulting in the loss of 909 lives. Those who refused to drink the cocktail were reportedly forcefully injected with it. Jones apparently preached that those who remained drugged with the opiate of religion had to be brought to enlightenment. Socialism. Another movement that had a much longer run was the one known as the Branch Davidians. They were operational from 1955 right up until 1993 when their idealistic world came crashing down on them. This group truly believed they were part of a religion, as it was a sect that stemmed from the Seventh-day Adventists. In 1993, the group led by a man named David Koresh holed themselves up in a compound in Waco, Texas, in fear of the apocalypse, which they believed was imminent. One of the things that Koresh firmly believed and taught his followers was that he was the Messiah. He also declared that all women, including those underage or already married, were his spiritual wives. After convincing his group that the apocalypse was imminent, Koresh led them into a compound in late 1992. The end was in sight. In February 1993, agents from the Department of Alcohol, Firearms, and Tobacco raided the place on the suspicion that Koresh was stockpiling weapons. What started as a shootout soon turned into a standoff between Branch Davidians and the FBI. It lasted an unbelievable 51 days. That's almost 2 months. Nothing against the FBI back then, but today, a standoff simply wouldn't last that long. Things only ended after tanks were brought in. The entire compound was filled with tear gas and eventually caught fire. More than 80 people died that day. The Sullivanians were operational between 1955 and 1991, and they were founded by a guy with the name Saul B. Newton. This is, however, one group that did not end in the death of hundreds, it merely fizzled out. Newton and his wife, Dr. Jane Pierce, believed that what they called the traditional nuclear family had to change, because it was the root of all social anxiety. And so they set out to create a viable alternative, something that in their mind would fix society and all of its problems. If only it were that simple, right? Despite not having any formal training as a therapist, Newton set up shop in not one or two, but 3 buildings on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, where he ran the Sullivan Institute as both a therapy center and a polyamorous commune. The members of this group were explicitly forbidden from engaging in exclusive relationships, which means they were known to engage in sexual activity with each other. Any children born into the Sullivanians were immediately sent away to boarding school or caretakers with very little visitation allowed from their parents. In fact, all members were encouraged to cut ties with their former friends and family members. Stick around to hear about 2 celebrities you probably didn't know had ties with a cult that is still in operation today. And no, we're not referring to Tom Cruise. But before we tell you more, remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. In the 1970s, the group, which by that time consisted of about 500 members, merged with a progressive theater collective called The Fourth Wall. Together, they all relocated to Orlando in 1979. After seeing a decline in membership in the 80s, the Sullivan Institute ended with the death of Newton in 1991. Another group that met its end in tragedy was the one known as Heaven's Gate. Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles, 2 clearly disturbed individuals, founded the group in San Diego in 1972. They based it on the premise that aliens would escort members of the group to the Kingdom of Heaven via an extraterrestrial spacecraft. In 1975, Applewhite and Nettles, along with 20 followers, disappeared. It is believed that the 2 leaders convinced their flock to give up their earthly possessions, leave their families behind, and move away with them. During their search for aliens, they lived under the radar of authorities and off the grid, camping everywhere from Rhode Island to Oklahoma. However, things only ended another 2 decades later. In March 1997, the group carefully planned and then executed a mass suicide timed to coincide with the arrival of the Hale-Bopp comet, which members believed would conceal the alien spacecraft on its way to Earth. About 39 men and women dressed themselves up in black tunics and sneakers. Then, they ate an applesauce mixture that contained a sedative and vodka, covered their heads in plastic bags, and died. It wasn't forced upon them, as became clear when the authorities found a rather upbeat video recording the group had made prior to the demise. In it, they explained they were happy and excited to be able to progress to the so-called next level. Autopsies disturbingly revealed that 9 out of the 18 men, including Applewhite, had been surgically castrated. The group mandated celibacy. And finally, we have a cult that started in 1968 and is actually still active today. This group calls themselves Children of God, Family International. They are not viewed as Christians, but rather a communist offshoot. The group is by far the most disturbing on our list, and they have beliefs that will send shivers down your spine. They were founded by David Berg, though he used to call himself Moses. He died in 1994, but offshoots of the cult can reportedly still be found in more than 80 countries. For someone so concerned with moral decay and evolution, Berg had a very sex-centric perspective on how to spread the views of Jesus, including reported recruitment through flirty fishing. He apparently also opposed anti-pedophilia laws and instead believed that having intercourse with children was a divine right. Berg is widely viewed as having been a master of propaganda. He wrote, published, and distributed pamphlets that contained his so-called teachings. While the group has changed its name several times over the years, its beliefs remain in place. Something very few people know is that actors Joaquin Phoenix and Rose McGowan were born into this cult. Neither of them are still involved with it or their members, and have on several occasions spoken out against the group.